Tonight we are going, as you very well know, to speak about dreams. It's not a workshop in dreams, so I don't expect you to fall asleep. I would like you to remain awake. Since the days of our friend Sigmund Freud and another good friends of ours, Jung, we are highly interested in dreams. That's why we have this expert here tonight. But dreams in the Bible are not necessarily a window to the dark side of the moon. Dreams in the Bible are most of the time are direct messages from God, prophecies for the future. The first text I have here, if you look at the text now, it's time to start working. It's from a story in the book of Genesis in which God is talking to King Abimelech of the Philistines. God is just making a phone call, talking to the king. God is sitting high in heaven, and so he has to make this phone call to address the king. He doesn't meet him here on earth, and he is very overt about about the message. So in this text, there is nothing much to interpret. We can move on to the next text. The next text, I have just a quotation here from the story of the interpretation of Joseph of the dreams of Pharaoh, of King Pharaoh of Egypt. And Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams are one and the same. God has told Pharaoh what he is about to do. We have two dreams here, actually with identical meaning, but having two dreams is like a control mechanism to make sure that the meaning of the dream is very clear. The third text from Deuteronomy, you can see that it's a legitimate way of prophecy, dreaming. There are some people who dream, who are dreaming. That's their profession. They are paid for dreaming, which is a great profession. I would have liked to do it. So you see, if there appears among you a prophet or a dream diviner, and he gives you a sign or a portent, saying, let us follow and worship our gods, other gods, then we are not allowed, of course, to follow this dream diviner, because God is just testing us to see whether we are loyal to him. But what's the most important element in this text for me is that dream diviners, meaning people who dream, are some kind of prophets. They get the message from God through their dreams, and then they tell us, who are not capable of getting these divine messages, what they have just seen or heard. For instance, in text number 4, Miriam and Aaron, the siblings of Moses, complain. They complain as if Moses is behaving as if he's superior to them, and they complain about it, and God has to tell them. I didn't copy the whole text. When a prophet of the Lord arises among you, I make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream, not with my servant Moses. Moses is superior. With him I speak mouth to mouth, plainly, and not in riddles, from which you understand that a dream is like a riddle, and riddle may have more than one interpretation. That's why Moses is superior to the other prophets, because with him God is very clear about his ideas. Now let us look at a very interesting dream, text number 5 from the book of Genesis. It's about Abraham. That's the story of the covenant between the pieces. God is promising Abraham that his offspring is going to inherit the land, and Abraham wants a sign to make sure that God is serious about the message. At the beginning of the story, or at this scene, Abraham has to prepare the stage for this dream. God is telling him, and let's see now that every element in this story is important. We have the dream has two elements to it. It has the audio element and the visual element, and we'll see what's the connection between the audio one and the visual one. So Abraham is being told by God, commanded by God, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old she-goat, a 3-year-old ram, and a turtle dove and a young bird. He brought him all these and cut them in two, placing each half opposite to the other, but he did not cut the bird. I'm sure that you are curious to know why he has to cut 3 animals. All 3 of them are 3 years old, and why doesn't he have to cut the bird? I hope you see that you can imagine the picture that is drawn here. And now comes a bad omen. Birds of prey come down upon the carcasses, and Abraham drove them away. Meaning Abraham is not passive. When he sees this danger coming, this bad omen, he's like pushing the birds of prey away. As the sun was about to set, a deep sleep fell upon Abraham, and a great dark dread descended upon him. And he, meaning the big guy, God, said to Abraham, know well that your offspring shall be strangers in the land not theirs, meaning in Egypt, and they shall be enslaved and oppressed 400 years. But I will execute judgment on the nation they shall serve, and at the end they shall go free with great wealth. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a ripe old age, and they shall return here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. The Bible sounds... Anyway, so you may ask yourselves, what's the connection between the picture we had just seen with the 3 cut animals and the birds which were not cut, and the message Abraham gets about his offspring getting back to the country after being enslaved in Egypt in the 4th generation? I think that most of you already understand it. Those of you who don't understand it yet, I'll explain it now. 3 generations will be enslaved in Egypt. 3 generations, the parallel of which are the 3 animals that have been cut. The 4th generation that will get free is actually symbolized by the birds that haven't been cut. The birds which in many cultures like present freedom, they can fly into the air, and they haven't been cut, and they represent the 4th generation will come back to the country. We can still ask ourselves, why are we talking about 3 generations being enslaved and the 4th generation that will go free? And an answer for this question we find in the law of the Hebrew slave in the book of Deuteronomy, where we hear that the person who has actually had a slave and has to let him go free, God is telling this person, when you do set him free, do not feel aggrieved, for in the 6 years he has given you, double the service of a hired man, of a laborer. Meaning a laborer works for 3 years and goes free on the 4th. And here you had a great deal. You had a person working for you for 6 years, so don't feel so bad. So what we hear about in the story of the covenant between the pieces is that if a laborer works for 3 years, a human laborer works for 3 years and goes off free on the 4th, when we talk about a nation, the nation works or is enslaved for 3 generations and goes free on the 4th. When the sun set and it was very dark, there appeared a smoking oven and a flaming torch which passed between the pieces. And this flaming torch, or whatever it is reminding us, of course, of what we are going to see in the time of the Exodus, that the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. As if we see now that the pillar in Abraham is seeing in his dream what's going to happen hundreds of years later, that the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud will actually pass before the Israelites. I hope you didn't forget yet the picture we have drawn. Half animals here, half animals here, and now this oven is passing between the pieces. The way actually we will pass through the Sea of Reeds, when the Sea of Reeds will actually be divided into 2, the way you see it in Psalm 136, text number 9, who split apart the piece of the Sea of Reeds into pieces, His steadfast love is eternal, and made Israel pass through it. And the terminology that is used in the psalm is exactly the terminology which is used in our story. The pieces, gezarim, appears in both texts. So what we saw is actually that every element in the picture has its meaning, and what Abraham has actually seen is a prophecy for the future. Now we should move on to the dreams in the story of Joseph. And in the story of Joseph, we have actually three pairs of dreams. We have Joseph's own dreams, then the dreams of the two ministers of Pharaoh, and then the dreams of Pharaoh himself. What's interesting about all these dreams in the story of Joseph is that there is no soundtrack. All these are silent movies before the soundtrack was invented. So these dreams are really riddles, and riddles need interpretation. And the official interpreter of each of the dreams is not necessarily the only interpreter, and there is, in many of these dreams, we'll see that there is more than one interpretation. Good riddles have more than one interpretation to them, or more than one solution to them. So Joseph starts his career as a dreamer, and later on he becomes a dream interpreter. Of course, also in Israel and then the ancient Near East, there were professional dream interpreters. Even in Babylon, we have found books, guides for interpreters of dreams. If you see something like that in a dream, if you see, let's say, a horn of a cow in a dream, it means that you'll get rich. If you see an elephant in your dream, it means that you'll be smashed by an elephant, etc., etc. Also in the Babylonian Talmud, in Tractate Brachot, we have a guide for dream interpreters, which is very interesting. But here in the story of Joseph and his dreams and the dreams he's going to interpret, Joseph is not a professional dream interpreter. He says that it's God who can interpret the dreams, not himself. So let's start reading the dreams now. Text number 10 is the first one. Once Joseph had a dream which he told to his brothers, and they hated him even more. You know that the circumstances of this dream, Joseph was the favored son by his father. There was a lot of envy going on between him and his brother, a lot of tension, and that's when he has this dream, and he's stupid enough, he's young and stupid yet, to go and to tell his brothers about his dream. And there are three stages in this dream. All start, at least in Hebrew, not in English, with the word vehinei. The first stage, there we were binding sheaves in the field. And one can be surprised because this family, as we know them, is not a family of farmers. That's a family of shepherds. So why does he dream about, binding sheaves in the field? So in the first stage, he's talking about him and his brothers. But look what happened in the second stage, when suddenly my sheaf stood up and remained upright. He prefers not to talk about himself, but it's his sheaf that stands up and stands up. Then your sheaves, that's the third element, then your sheaves gathered around and bowed low to my sheaf. And of course, his brothers get so angry, they immediately understand what the dream means, and they say to him, "Do you mean to reign over us? Do you mean to rule over us?" And they hated him even more for his talk about his dreams. But of course, they have solved only one element, meaning they understand that Joseph is talking here about him becoming their ruler in the future, which will of course happen in Egypt later on. But they didn't understand why he was dreaming about sheaves. You of course understand why he's dreaming about sheaves, because we are talking now about what will happen in the future when Joseph will collect all the grain of Egypt and store it and solve the problem of the hunger. I'm sure you know this phenomenon in biblical poetry of parallelism. Yeah, so what we have here in the Joseph story, that, as I said, we have three pairs of dreams, and all three pairs are like a parallelism in poetry, because the second dream carries a very similar message to the first one. But the second dream is even worse than the first one. I can refer to it as intensified parallelism. Because here, what does he dream here? He dreamed about another dream and told it to his brothers, saying, "Look, I have had another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." This dream, by the way, he talks about in a very short way. If the first dream took him 16 words to tell, this one is only 8 words, as if he's trying to tell him to escape before his brothers will get really angry with him. It's not very nice to say something like that about Joseph, but this is really a dream of an egomaniac. You know, usually, not the Israelites, of course, but the other peoples, they worship the sun and the moon, they bow to them. And here Joseph dreams that he is on the top of the world. Actually, he's higher than the sky. And the sun and the moon, who actually rule the day and night, are now going down to him. I hope you remember the story about Joseph's father's dream. Jacob, in Genesis chapter 28, when he's about to leave the country to go to Haran, he gets to Bethel. He's lying down there and he has this dream about the ladder going up to heaven and the angels of the Lord climbing the ladder and coming down. What a difference. Jacob was so humble. He was lying down there, and it's not him who climbed to heaven, but it was the angels who climbed up and came down. While Joseph is so very proud of himself. Yeah. We have also to pay attention to the number of elements we have here. He's talking about the sun and the moon and 11 stars, which his father immediately understands and said to him, "Are we to come, I and your mother and your brothers, to bow low to you to the ground?" Again, asking a rhetorical question the way the brothers asked in the first dream. Of course, Joseph's mother is already dead. Rachel died in chapter 35, and here we are already in chapter 37. So the father, by saying something like that, may tell the brothers, don't take it too seriously, because if he's dreaming about his mother bowing down to him and she is not alive anymore, don't worry, it won't really happen. In the dreams of the ministers of Pharaoh, we'll have the number 3. In the dreams of Pharaoh, we'll have the number 7. So numbers play a very clear role in these dreams. And the question is, what the meaning of the number 11 plus 1 plus 1, meaning 13? Why is dreaming about 13 elements bowing down to him? And I'm sure that your mathematics is much better than mine. That's why I'm a professor of Bible and not a professor of mathematics. But anyway, Joseph was 17 years old when the story of Joseph starts. And he will be 30 years old when he'll actually stand before Pharaoh. So 13 years. The 13 years are expressed indirectly by the number of elements bowing down to him. And later on, text number 12, of course, when the brothers come to Egypt and they bow down to Joseph before they know who he is. And now they come to Egypt because of the famine in the land of Canaan, and they come there for food. And you see how now the element of the shifts in his first dream gets its full meaning now. In the first dream about the shifts, and then also in the dreams of the ministers of Pharaoh, and also in Pharaoh's dreams, we'll see that in all of them we have an element related to food. The only dream in which we don't have any element of food is in the one of the sun and the moon bowing down to Joseph. But if you look into text number 14, the blessing of Moses to the tribe of Joseph, and of Joseph he said, "Blessed of the Lord be his land, with the bounty of dew from heaven, and of the deep that couches below, with the bounteous yield of the sun, and the bounteous crop of the moons." Meaning the sun and the moon play an important role in promising you good crops. By quoting the blessing of Moses to the tribe of Joseph, I want to show you that a dream in the book of Genesis can get one more interpretation pretty far in the book of Deuteronomy. And we can see that we get even more interpretation of these dreams later on. You all know the story about Joshua, son of Nun. Joshua was an Ephraimite, a descendant of Joseph. Yeah, and you remember that it was Joshua who said to the sun and the moon, "Stand still, O sun, in Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ayalon." The sun and the moon obeyed Joshua, the descendant of Joseph. And as we read, and the sun stood still and the moon halted while the nation wreaked judgment on its foes, as it's written in the book of Yashar, etc., etc. And again, one more interpretation of that dream, much later in the book of Kings. If you remember when the United Kingdom, and I'm not referring to Great Britain now, but the kingdom of David and Solomon, when it was divided into two kingdoms, it was Jeroboam, another Ephraimite, another descendant of Joseph, that ruled over 11 tribes and left only one tribe for Judah. So here you see the 11 tribes, like the 11 stars, bowing down to him. So if we have time, we'll go quickly through the dreams of the ministers of Pharaoh. Poor Joseph, you know, for being so proud, he is punished by being thrown by his brothers into the pit. He thought he would be up in heaven, then he finds himself in the pit. Later on, he's thrown by his master in Egypt also into a pit, into prison. Now he's in jail, and in jail he meets two of the ministers of Pharaoh, the one in charge, the chief baker, and the one who served Pharaoh his drinks. Before we start reading these dreams, we think that again we'll have the phenomenon of synonymous parallelism here. We'll be surprised to see that here it will be antithetic parallelism. Both of them, I'm reading now, both of them, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt who were confined in the prison, dreamed in the same night, each his own dream, and each dream with its own meaning. When Joseph came to them in the morning, he saw that they were distraught. He asked Pharaoh's courtiers, who were with him in custody in his master's house, saying, "Why do you appear downcast today?" And they said to him, "We had dreams, and there is no one to interpret them." So Joseph said to them, "Surely God can interpret. Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer is more courageous. He is the first one to tell his dream. Then the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph. He said to him, "In my dream there was a vine in front of me. On the vine there were 3 branches. It had barely budded when out came its blossoms, and its clusters ripened into grapes." It's a very optimistic picture what we see here, and it all happens so quickly, budding, and then the flowers are already out, and the fruit is ripened. So we already know this dream is going to get a positive interpretation. Cupbearer is in his dream. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed the cup into Pharaoh's hand. It's interesting because first we had the 3 branches, then we had the 3 stages of the fruit being ripened, and then we have the 3 acts that are actually being done by the cupbearer. Since the cupbearer is so very sure of himself that he's presenting Pharaoh again his dreams, then Joseph doesn't have any choice but to give this dream indeed a positive, optimistic interpretation, and that's what he says. The 3 branches are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will pardon you and restore you to your post. You will place Pharaoh's cup in his hand, as was your custom formerly when you were his cupbearer. Look what happens now with the second dream, the dream of the baker. When the chief baker saw how favorably he had interpreted, he said to Joseph, now he's very optimistic too. And look how he starts, "In my dream, similarly," meaning he already wants Joseph to give him the same interpretation. So he says, "There were 3 open work baskets." Again, the number 3, the same number. The author of the story really wants us to follow his way of thinking that it's going to be really a very similar interpretation. In the interpretation of the first dream of the cupbearer, Joseph said, Pharaoh will pardon you. Literally, Pharaoh will lift your head. And that's why now the baker mentions his own head in his dream. There were 3 open-work baskets on my head. In the uppermost basket were all kinds of food, meaning all these kinds of breads and cookies and cakes for Pharaoh that the baker prepares. And the birds were eating it out of the basket above my head. And you would have expected him to do something about it. This is the food of Pharaoh and the birds are eating it. He should have stopped them. So you see already the difference between the two. The first one, the cupbearer, was very optimistic, very courageous, very active, while this guy is very passive. He lets things happen, and that's why he's going to lose his head. The way Joseph starts interpreting the dream, we can still think that it's going to be a very similar interpretation. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head, very similar interpretation, but surprise, surprise, and impale you upon a pole, and the birds will pick off your flesh. And of course, Joseph's interpretation is the true interpretation, text number 19, on the 3rd day, his birthday. By the way, that's the only text in the Bible that mentions a birthday. Pharaoh made up a banquet for all his officials, and he singled out the chief cupbearer and his chief baker from among his officials, at least as if again they are going to have the same fate, but he restored the chief cupbearer into his cupbearing, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But the chief baker he impaled, just as Joseph has interpreted to them. Of course, if now the baker loses his life, it opens a job for Joseph. Now Joseph will be the one who will solve the problem of famine and feed all Egypt. If you look at text number 20, for instance, you understand the symbolic nature of the dream of the baker. Like the curse that we find in the book of Deuteronomy, your carcasses shall become food for all the birds of the sky and all the beasts of the earth, with none to frighten them off. Meaning, since he didn't do anything to frighten the birds, now he's being eaten the way the birds ate the food of Pharaoh in his dream. One more element in his dream, in the last dream, that I find also a lot in Freud's interpretations. The guy sees there these open work baskets, salei chori. Why does he see this type of baskets? Chori has also another meaning in Hebrew, and chori is anger, meaning Pharaoh is going to be angry with him. We have no time, and anyway, I didn't copy for you the dreams of Pharaoh, but let me just sum them up. In his first dream, Pharaoh stands by the Nile, and he sees these sheaves of grain, and then sheaves of grain, and the empty ones, the thin ones, are eating the full ones. In the second dream, in which the thin cows are eating the fat cows, Pharaoh is not mentioned at all. He's not seeing himself at all, as if to say, me, Pharaoh, I have no solution for the problem that Egypt faces. I need somebody else to come up with a solution, and the one to come up with the solution will, of course, be our Joseph. You see that all these dreams in the Joseph cycle, which have no soundtrack, I like pictures that encourage us to midrashize them. In many ways, dreams are like pictures that ask for interpretation, ask for midrashim. And one can come up with different midrashim interpreting a dream or a picture. I don't know if our esteemed psychologists will agree with me, but Sigmund Freud had some good Jewish education. He didn't always admit it, but reading his biography, I'm pretty sure that he knew very well what Midrash was, and I think that his Midrash, his dream interpretations, in many ways follow the way of Midrash. And now it's time to listen to Stanislav.
А теперь давайте послушаем Станислава. Я подумал, что вот фараон, да, фактически олицетворяет сознание и бессознательное своего народа. Я подумал, как бы в нашей стране этот сон мог бы выглядеть, ну, у кого-то нашего фараона, и как бы толкователь мог бы прийти. Вероятно, это был бы сон про цену на нефть. Вот я думаю, там 7 лет цена на нефть еще будет у нас выше $100, да, а еще через 7 лет вот она опустится там ниже 30. И в этом смысле, ну, конечно, вот такой предприимчивый толкователь снов, достаточно профессиональный, сказал бы, что, конечно, нужно создавать еще более серьезный стабилизационный фонд. Вот, ну, вот, как-то так, да. И здесь очень важно, что насколько правитель олицетворяет бессознательное своего народа. Насколько это одно и то же, насколько одновременно голод для фараона – это и личная, и трагедия народа. Заметим, что все сны, которые мы разбирали, они очень конкретно волнуют ключевые вопросы человека. Да? То есть, ну, какими вопросами озабочены герои снов, которые мы разбирали? Ну, понятно, что если вы сидите в тюрьме, то вообще вас волнует два вопроса. Да? Вот мы тоже недавно все были свидетелями, да, там, вот, какой приговор будет, да, насколько он там будет помилует или вот, казнят. И в этом смысле архетипическая реальность, она вечная и продолжается прямо сейчас. Есть такая школа современного юнгианца Хиллмана, который пишет, собственно, разрабатывает архетипическую психологию. Он говорит, что вообще-то сны вообще не надо интерпретировать, что когда мы интерпретируем сновидение, мы, к сожалению, сводим к текстовому пространству. Мне нужно заметить, что, конечно, и Фрейд, и в меньшей степени Юнг, но тоже Юнг были людьми книги, да? И, соответственно, для Хиллмана, когда мы интерпретируем образ, то есть переводим его в текст, мы в каком-то смысле его убиваем. А образ ценен сам по себе, да? Вот когда мы просто рассматриваем образ сна, ну, по сути, Хиллман предлагает нечто типа медитации на образе сновидения, когда мы его вращаем, как-то рассматриваем с разных сторон, и не называем, например, мы не говорим, что любая женщина, которая нам снится, это наша мама, или в юнгианской традиции часто любят говорить про аниму. Ну, вот любая женщина, которая снится, это анима. Но это оба варианта такой редукции, причем, ну, понятно, редукции к некоторому знаку. Вот. И опять корректно здесь скорее. И еще Хиллман говорит довольно интересную вещь для нас. Это про то, что если, какое воздействие у нас часто оказывает сон, что если нам снится, предположим, наш отец, да, используя такую фрейдовскую образность, то вот представьте себе, что сегодня ночью вам приснился ваш отец. Понятно, что сегодня, если при разговоре телефонном, скажем, с отцом, вы не будете с ним разговаривать так же. Да, то есть сон показывает, что в нашем отношении к реальным объектам есть очень много архетипической темы. Да? Мы как бы проецируем на наших родителей, на других людей некоторую архетипическую тему, в общем, которая с ними прямо не связана. И вот эти сны раскрывают эту архетипическую тему, довольно ярко ее показывают. Ну, вот, наверное, мне бы хотелось оставить какое-то пространство для дискуссии. Спасибо за внимание.